So Jamie Smith in the book You Are What You Love identifies what he calls secular liturgies. Those are those things in our world that are so ubiquitous. They're everywhere, but they're invisible. But nonetheless, these things unconsciously shape our souls, shape our mind, shape our spirit, and just shape our ways of living in the world. I'd like to take a little break from the normal course, what I've been teaching, and talk about what I identify as three secular liturgies. I mean, there are more than three, but there was just three I'd like to point out. The first is time. Time is everywhere. We're beings of time. We can't imagine not having time. And yet time actually has changed over, well, the history of time. I want you to imagine the pre-modern world. No one had watches. How did you know what time it was? If you didn't have a watch, you do have hourglasses, but they were rare. You had sundials. For the most part, though, you knew what time it was because, the sun rose and most people were agrarian farmers, and that's when you got up to do the work. You kind of knew it was lunchtime when your belly was grumbling, and also the sun is more or less in the middle of the sky, and you knew when to quit working because the sun went down. That's kind of how it was for you. We just always knew time was there. Now, this is a pre-Newtonian world and the pre-modern world when Isaac Newton decided, sort of showed us that the world is like a measurable clockwork-like machine, and that it being measurable, calculus, mathematics, we can know the world and measure the world through mathematics. It's regular and predictable. Yet for Isaac Newton to say that the world is a clockwork machine, you have to invent clocks, and no one had invented clocks yet. In the 13th century, they actually invented the mechanical clock for the first time. And what they did with this mechanical clock was they put it on top of a clock tower. And so then suddenly everyone knew what time it was. But before they invented time, you had to invent the concept of an hour, a minute, a second. That never existed before. You couldn't be 20 minutes late for a meeting because 20 minutes didn't exist. It was more of a roundabout understanding of what time was, and time was always rooted in God, God's nature, God-controlled nature. There was a belief that God made the sun rise every morning by his will. God made the rain fall, God made the moon come up. And therefore, your awareness of time in nature was always deeply rooted in your awareness of your radical dependency on God, that God makes things happen. Nothing happens independent from God. Also in the medieval world, more likely, you kind of knew what time it was because there was a bell tower on top of a church, your local church. More likely, there was a church with a bell. Now, on Sunday mornings, when you were summoned to worship, the bell would ring. So there was something like some kind of time beyond the moon and the sun and the position of the sun in the sky, and that was a church. And also, very likely throughout the day, there were monks and people like monks or priests who were summoned to pray throughout the day, and they had time, again, hourglasses or candles or water clocks. They weren't very accurate, but on a regular basis throughout the hours, the bells would ring to summon the monks or the priests to pray. So you're not a monk necessarily, you're not a priest, but your life, the soundscape of your life was punctuated by bells on Sunday, bells punctuating the times when the monks and the priests would pray. So that's another way you could sort of tell what time was. But time, nature, sun, the bells of the church, these are all ways in which you're always being summoned to the idea that God is there. Your world is ordered by time. But once they built the mechanical clock, suddenly time has been liberated from nature. It's a man-made time that's mechanical and scientific. It's much more accurate than the natural time that you associate with God. And suddenly, ever since then, time's been mechanical. Time is our own. We own time. In the 19th century, early in the 19th century, we coined the term wasting time, saving time, using your time wisely, squandering your time. What does that sound like, actually? Actually, you ever heard the phrase, time is money, money is time? Well, yeah, there you go. These metaphors were actually invented by people who were in the Industrial Revolution, who were trying to regulate the hours of their workers, like show up at 8, you have a 20-minute lunch break at 20, go home at 5. And every minute of the time had to be regulated and disciplined. And so they had the idea of leisure time, work time. But time becomes money. In other words, time is something we can hoard, we can control, we can spend. Time now belongs to us. Whereas earlier on, time belonged to God. I mean, it's kind of weird. I mean, if you think about it, why did the world get secularized? Was it Darwin's fault, Nietzsche's fault, Feuerbach, all these atheist philosophers? Well, maybe they had a role, but I wonder if clocks and mechanical time, the way we invented time, took time out of the God's world and made it ours. And we own time. We master time. We can manipulate time and use it as we see fit. And so we imagine the world differently. Somehow God just, it's not nothing necessarily atheistic about having a watch or having time, but in the modern sense, but it sort of pushes God to the side, makes God less essential. So I would say time is literally a secular liturgy for us. It marks our day, it punctuates our day, and it doesn't have anything to do with God. We control it. The second thing I want to talk about actually as a form of a secular liturgy is kind of off the wall, but the invention of pharmaceuticals. Until about the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was very little ways to kill pain. As we know, you probably know about the Civil War when people were like sawing off legs and limbs with saws, and the only kind of way you could kill pain was to just drink a lot of heavy liquor and pass out, hopefully. There's no way to really kill pain until about the late 1800s when they invented this thing called laudanum. Now, laudanum it's actually a mixture. It's a watery mixture of opium and morphine. It was the world's first widely distributed painkiller. And so suddenly, we now, human beings, have the means to kill pain, eliminate pain, take pain away. But laudanum was also a highly addictive drug they didn't know about at the time. And again, it's opium and morphine. Not only did take pain away, but it actually made you very, very happy. So there was actually an epidemic of laudanum abuse where people initially prescribed laudanum or just took laudanum just to take away the pain. But later on, they just got addicted to taking the edge away from boredom, anxiety, or depression, or just fear. People just took it all the time. It was highly addictive. But the idea of, I can now take a drug to take pain away. Whereas before, if you're in pain, you just accept that that's how your lot in life, not much you can do about it, and you rely on the mercy of God. But now there's a scientific mastery of pain. And the idea of pain itself becomes almost obscene or sinful. Like, if I could take your pain away with drugs, but I choose not to, I would be a terrible, immoral person. And because we human beings, through science, control pain or no pain. And I wonder if that's also the time when we start looking at God differently. There's suffering in our lives, both emotional, physical, or just circumstantial. Like, you're devastated. Horrible natural events occur. You just go bankrupt. People die terribly in your life that you care about deeply. And these things used to be in the hands of God, and you accept the fact that we just have to accept pain as part of our lives. Pain is sanctifying. Pain is just part of our nature. Pain is just part of the world we live in. Except when we invent things like laudanum and later on other pharmaceuticals that take away pain, take away disease, save lives. With the idea of a God who wouldn't save our lives like that, a God who would just wipe out pain within a few minutes. That becomes obscene and immoral. And suddenly the idea of depending on God maybe erodes away a little bit. I wonder if the idea of the readily available pharmaceuticals in our lives take away pain, cure diseases. Also, it's kind of like a secular liturgy. I get migraine headaches. I have allergies. I kind of take a lot of medicine. Not a lot, Sudafed, Claritin, Motrin for my headaches. It's actually kind of part of my daily life now, and I appreciate it. I really, really do. But I have this idea that I can master my life through medicine, over-the-counter stuff, goods, legal stuff. And that's kind of like a daily liturgy in my life. And it gets me the idea that there are ways to take away my pain. Walgreen, and it would be wrong for me not to in my mind. And I wonder how that affects my understanding of who God is, that God would allow me to suffer for some good sanctifying purpose. That's harder to accept after the revolution of pharmaceuticals. I'll bring a third way in which I think a secular liturgy has affected our lives, and that's the idea of instrumental reasoning. Now, instrumental reasoning is this way of thinking about the world or thinking about problems where the primary way of thinking through something is, does it work? Does it accomplish the temporal means I wanted to accomplish? Let me give you one quick example. Napalm, we all know what that is. It's that stuff, ever see Apocalypse Now or those movies where some jet flies by, squirts like all this flame all over the ground and incinerates an entire landscape. That's napalm. Napalm was invented at Harvard in the 1950s during World War II. For war. And the napalm, the chemists had invented napalm. They used a lot in the Korean War, a lot in Vietnam. But the thing about napalm is that it's tricky. There are two things about napalm they had to fix. It's not so easy to make napalm. A bunch of smart chemists at Harvard had to figure this out. One is viscosity, and two is temperature of heat. If napalm, it's a liquid. If it's too watery, it spreads out so much that it doesn't do enough destruction. It's just too thin. If it's too gooey and goopy, like glue, it doesn't spread out enough. So the destruction causes isn't wide enough. So they got to figure out this ideal balance between wateriness and stickiness. They need to stick, but not stick too much. They need to be spread, but not spread too far. The other trick of a napalm is like, how hot does it burn? If it burns really, really hot, it just blows up and then it's gone. It just burned up too quickly. If it doesn't burn hot enough, it doesn't do enough destruction. So what they need to do is find it to burn hot enough, not too hot, not too cold, but hot enough that it does a maximal damage in what they're trying to destroy. So gooiness and heat. Ultimately, I think they perfected napalm. It's really, really destructive. And so that's instrumental reasoning. We have to figure out, can we make napalm work? What you don't ask in instrumental reasoning is, ought we make napalm? Is napalm a good thing or bad thing? Is it moral? That's not instrumental reasoning. Those are rooted in, and I think, when we don't think about, in an older world, all things were rooted towards, is it good? Is it true? Is it beautiful? Is it holy? Does it glorify God? Does this please God? Once you kind of remove God out of the picture, it doesn't mean you're a raging atheist, but you don't think about napalm if you're a chemist in Harvard. I'm sorry, you don't think about God if you're making napalm in Harvard. You have a very specific goal, instrumental reasoning, if you will. And that's kind of become how we function our lives. We go to work, we think about things like instrumental reasoning. Can I get the thing done? How do I get this done? I have to make the money. I make things more efficient. Or stuff like, return on investment. How much energy do I put into this, and what am I getting out of it? These are the questions that operate our daily lives. And I just have this idea of like the migration of paradigms. So we have instrumental reasoning, return on investment. We think about efficiency, getting things done in a proper, fast kind of way to maximize profit in our work lives. And then we have to be Christians, And I wonder if this sort of migrates into our faith and theology, where we think about church and our faith through instrumental reasoning or return on investment, or what are we getting out of this? I wonder if we roll into church and maybe on the subconscious level we're wondering, what am I getting out of church? Does church fulfill some need in my life? What problem does it fix? Is it worth it for me? If I go to church, will my life be better? How will it be better? Well, if it's not better, then maybe I should find a new church that will fit my needs. I don't know if I don't think we ever say this stuff out loud. Maybe we do, but even if you don't say it out loud, I just wonder if the lives of instrumental reasoning that we live in Monday through Friday, Saturday, or 99% of our lives, how does that not affect the way we understand God and theology and our relationship with God? Our faith is not instrumental. It's not practical necessarily. It doesn't fulfill a return on investment. We worship God because we are called to glorify God and worship him, and because it pleases God. It may have some side benefits, but that's not the point. So time, pharmacology, instrumental reasoning. I think these might be all this ubiquitous, ever-present, invisible secular liturgies that shape our souls, shape our minds. And what Smith is calling us to do is, actually revelation, reveal, uncover these things and be aware of them. And so what we're called to do actually is live in this world, but, have a counter liturgy, have a counter formation. We're formed in this way by the world, and we have to push against that formation and become other kinds of holy people.